Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everybody into Garden of Doom, and this week we're continuing our journey eastward and mystical. Our guest this week is Jason Reed, who's out of the UK, but he has studied in China and Malaysia and probably other places, and wrote a book called Practical Chinese Magic, which, as I understand it, might be one of its kind. And in a strange, magical way, I know his publisher, and the publisher is not who introduced us. So it's just weird. I found Jason sort of randomly on Twitter, and then he responded, and we chatted for a little bit on Twitter, and and this is our first time actually chatting voice to voice, and we're using Skype, so face to face. But it's weird that in this big world, there's a small world, and so shout out to Mog Morgan. In some way, you introduced us, and Mog's been on the show twice. So the Egyptian Magic Show, and also we did a show earlier on sort of the Egyptian perspective on giants. I'm sorry, Egyptian magic sort of dovetailed with the Egyptian pantheon, and as does Chinese magic, or at least as I understand it from my reading of Jason's book. So without further ado, Jason Reed, thank you so much for joining us in the garden.
Yeah, you're welcome, and good evening.
Good evening to you. So thank you for joining us. I think the best way to start is just for you to introduce yourself and give your own bio, and sort of explain how you got into this arena and your journeys and your studies and your bona fides, so to speak.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. Right. Okay, I'm getting sort of more well known as an author of books on Chinese mysticism, philosophy, and magic. I don't want to say Daoism, because there is a difference, okay, which I might explain later if we get the chance.
We will.
Okay, so Daoism is a big field. But anyway, so it's a pretty good question. Where did I start from? Okay. I started off in the Western tradition, like many of the people you've had on the show before. So I started off with the Hermetic tradition, so rather like Mog, I studied the Egyptian system, Crowley, and all these kinds of people, the Golden Dawn. And that's where I started. But at the same time as I was doing this, since I was about, a young teenager, I was also a martial artist. So I studied martial arts too.
Sure.
So I always had that interest in the sort of Asian side of things. which goes hand in hand with martial arts. Now, if you know anything about martial arts isn't just fighting.
Right.
There's a whole lifestyle to it, a whole belief system, which is a really good window into the Chinese philosophical world, if you like.
Right. Everybody, anybody who's ever seen kung fu movies know that there's always monks involved, warrior monks, the Shaoling's monks, and which is sort of a stark difference between Western monks. I mean, the whole thing about Friar Tuck is that he was a monk, and they thought he was easy pickings, but he was a sort of a fat warrior. But in Chinese,
you could argue with the Templars as well. They were
true,
hardcore, sort of warriors and monks. So.
Right, but more exceptions to the rule, sort of. Yeah, I mean, everything during the Crusade era, they blurred it for whatever reasons.
Yeah,
but it wasn't embedded in the culture like it is in Chinese. It's like you said, hand in hand.
So martial arts was a window for me into the world of Chinese spirituality and philosophy. More philosophy, because at this stage, my teachers didn't really know anything about Chinese magic, to be blunt about it. I mean, they knew some ideas about, basic Chinese philosophy, which is part of Gong Fu, or Kung Fu, as it's said in the West, which is like things like Qigong, which is like certain breathing meditation exercises which uses the energy of Qi, which is universal energy. So I'm trying to put that in a nutshell at the moment. There's more to it. So, and there's also Chinese medicine ideas, which are inherent in the Chinese Gong Fu. And that's my first window into that Chinese spiritual experience. But for me, it wasn't enough. At this time, I was also in the military. I was in the Royal Navy. I was a language analyst, and I was traveling the world. One of the countries I stopped off was Singapore. And that's when I really investigated Chinese spirituality for the first time by actually going to temples and things like this. And I just felt a connection, which I'd never felt before, which I didn't feel with the Western stuff, like the Hermetic tradition I was doing before. And I thought, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. And from obviously I couldn't run away at that point,
Right. You can't go AWOL.
Like vagabond sailor in the temples. So I did my term of service, and at the end of that, I'd saved up enough money to go to Asia and look for a teacher, which was hard, which was actually a very difficult thing to find and do.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I went back to Singapore, mainly because there's not such a large language or cultural barrier, which means that they speak English. So it's a good place for me to learn the basics of Chinese spirituality, and that's when I met my first teacher. And he comes from a tradition called Maoshan, which is a kind of Taoist folk magic. And I use Taoist in very loose terms here. It's not the Taoism that people would actually be familiar with.
Well, let's make that distinction now. I mean, in whatever simplest terms you can. What is the Taoism that people are familiar with, and what is this Taoism, just so we have our terminology straight going forward?
I made the distinction like this. Okay, you have, just like in the West, you have the church, like you have the Catholic Church or the Methodist, the Anabaptist, whatever. You would call these Orthodox. Okay. But then you have like these other spiritual seeking groups like Wicca and I guess Freemasonry to a certain extent, the Golden Dawn, these kind of things, and I suppose anciently Gnosticism,
right,
which is the esoteric wing of Christianity, if you like. And it's the same in Asian culture. You have your popular forms, you do your Tai Tai Chi, and you do your Qi Gong, and you sit on a mountain and meditate, and maybe you learn some medicine, and worship the gods. It's about merit and being a good person. Then you have these other groups, which has all those aspects as well, like Qigong or internal alchemy and medicine and healing, and also self-development and magic. And these groups are more like the latter. They're more like it's like the difference between the Catholic Church and Voodoo, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. Which with like huge difference.
Sure.
Yeah. But there's an underlying similar philosophy there, and some of the symbolism is used.
Right.
So that's the general difference. And Mao Shan is one of these schools, a magical school, rather than a religious school. If you see the difference.
Yeah, I mean, for those people who are familiar with the MCU, you would think the difference between a regular Taoist temple and, I can't even remember the names, but wherever Doctor Strange goes to that giant temple where they're training people, and
yeah,
when he goes through the portal with the Wong, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't believe I can't remember. It's some Marvel geek I am, but anyway, it's just more spiritual. And with more more is a small word, only 4 letters, but there's a lot that comes with more. But I think that's enough for, our purpose to know that there's Taoism, sort of the more formal philosophy, religion, which is, sort of a combination of animism and polytheism, and then Taoism, which has a lot of those elements, but then more mystical and goes even further spiritually.
Yeah, exactly. But they're both good in their own way.
Sure.
I'm not dissing on orthodox Taoism. It's a perfectly balanced system that is suitable for a certain type of people.
Now, this is the Garden of Doom. You never have to worry about that. The people who are listening here, unless they're first-time listeners, so maybe they should pay attention, but the people who are listening to the show know that this is almost always a no-judgment zone, that we are just here to learn what someone else knows from their perspective, and we're not doing any conversions here, or we're not doing any active conversions here. If somebody in the audience gets converted because they love what they hear from someone, terrific. But we're just trying to get information so people are exposed to stuff, and mostly things that I don't know about, because that's what this show is. It's things I don't know about, but would like to learn something about. But instead of reading or researching, I find someone like you.
Sure, it's a good philosophy. Anyway, so that was my first teacher, was in Singapore, and I had the benefit of having that teaching in English, and I was learning Chinese, but I still wasn't that good,
right.
So Mandarin, and so I was learning the techniques in English and also in Mandarin, so I could build up a vocabulary of sort of like Chinese terms, because it's like a technical vocabulary, the same as you have in any other subject. And I learned with this teacher for 2 years, which was a really interesting experience. For example, some of the basic concepts in my book come from his teachings, like how to set up an altar, the relevance of the Big Dipper and stuff like that, which we'll go into later.
Yep.
And then after that, I really want to get back to the roots of the Mao Shan tradition specifically, because that's my tradition. That's what I was initiated into. That's a lineage. And he suggested I go to China, but I would have a real hard time finding it. So that's what I did. So I went to China, and obviously it's a very different culture in China, where occultism can land you in jail.
Right.
So
I noted that in the book that that it's outlawed, and that a lot of people who, let's just call them pilgrims, such as yourself, but not even from the outside, inside China, that it's outlawed for the folks, citizens of China, and visitors just the same.
Sure. They label it under superstition, even though several of the party leaders have been caught with their own magicians,
Well, party leadership has its privileges, right? It's like Napoleon the Pig said, not all pigs are created equal. So.
Yeah, and that's not uniquely Chinese.
No, it is not. No, it's not. It is not uniquely anything. It's probably the exceptions are more unique than the rule itself. But yeah,
absolutely.
But just to point out that it was a particularly dangerous place to be doing this at a dangerous time. I mean, this is within in this century, right? I mean, this is in the 21st century, and you have sort of the Chinese, the Chinese really see this as the age of China, and sort of the state is sort of the new god, so to speak.
Sure. So in China, it could land you in trouble showing an interest in occultism. But Daoism's okay. It has its own state-run Taoist organization. So you could go to their temples and learn Taoism.
Oh, okay, cool.
But occultism specifically is banned.
Right.
So you can imagine that the main temples have a lot of stuff missing from their syllabus.
Yeah.
So I was interested in trying to find a folk tradition, specifically Maoshan, which I was interested in and had already been initiated into. And, I was going through social media, looking for, specifically through booksellers and people like that, because there's actually an underground occult network in China, with people swapping books and stories and techniques,
right.
which is really fascinating. By then, my Chinese was pretty good, because I've been studying 2 years.
An immersion.
And so I was on things like Weixin or WeChat and Weibo, these kind of social media platforms. And obviously a lot of it's anonymous and through VPNs.
Right.
And I was trying to find a teacher, but it didn't really come to much fruit, because people were too,
scared.
And the couple that I did come across were usually some guy who'd, read a couple of books and,
right.
they're kind of not making it up, but, they weren't really in a lineage or anything. But during my time there, through these, on social media, through talking about these books and these topics, I did meet a girl, and who later became my wife.
Aww.
I'm still my wife.
Very good.
I should say.
Very good. Even better.
Right. Yeah, that's what I don't want to sleep with one eye open tonight.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you can cast the spell of protection. I read about it in your book.
Yeah. Right. So through her, I was introduced to her family, the Liang family, and that's how I met my long-term Maoshan teacher, Dr. Liang, or Master Liang. It's not actually a university doctor.
Okay.
It's just a polite term. So, and I studied with him for 12 years in Hunan, in a place called Yueyang, which is like quite near a famous mountain called Hongshan.
Yes. Well, I noticed that as you point out, the mountains are holy, and and China is huge, so there were multiple ones. So, it's sort of a figure of Mount Olympus, home of the gods, but in China there's multiple mountains and mountains.
Yeah, there's 5 main ones.
Right.
Called a Wuyi, right? So we could call it that. Excuse my Chinese, guys.
No, it's okay.
You might want to know some of the terminology.
As long as you don't go for too long in Chinese, that's fine. But I think it's great if you throw it in every now and then. It adds authenticity.
Right. Okay. Right. So then that's my story. But because of political pressures and in China with the new guy, it's not new now, but it was then. Me and Vicky, that's my wife's name, we decided to come back to England and at the same time preserve this teaching, which we feel is going to be lost in a generation or two. And that's when we decided to create a small organisation in my hometown in England for people that are interested. Also publish some books and let people know what a valid tradition looks like, and give them an opportunity to learn a new tradition, which I think is which is representative of Chinese magic in general, actually.
Yeah, well, I find in this era also people are looking for something, and they're all looking for something different and special. And people have probably tried a bunch of things that haven't worked, so maybe they'll, maybe the timing is right as well.
Syndrome, yeah. Right. So I think what it really for me is about is not so much one person trying to find new things, but I just think it's time to have more openness about these things. I mean, let's take the 19th century, for example. You had like Madame Blavatsky.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she was teaching about, you know, theosophy and this kind of thing, and claiming it was from Tibet. You know, and like who had these Tibetan masters. You know, like beaming out purple rays in their third eye, teaching, you know, that sort of thing.
Right.
Which actually quite informs the writers of Doctor Strange, by the way.
Yes,
So,
I was thinking the same thing.
Hidden Brotherhood in the Himalayas and all that sort of thing.
Right.
But we know that's not really that true. You know, well,
spoiler.
Maybe it is, right? You know, but there actually is a genuine Tibetan tradition.
Right.
Yeah. You know, Lamaism, or what you want to call it,
Absolutely.
Tantric yoga, that sort of thing. And now there are many, and because of the generosity of some teachers and translators and masters who have come from Tibet to share that, we don't have to hide behind this fiction anymore. You know, you can actually go in next door that thing, and that's what I want. That's what I'm trying to do.
Very good.
Open up that path.
So we got your creation story, your origin story, so to speak. So I think that is a really good segue or introduction into Chinese magic and Chinese ancient Chinese religion, which still survives in some corners to date. So I think a great place to start is, in fact, the creation myth. And I think people who have listened to this show frequently or just mythology buffs, you might hear some similarities to some other stories that you have heard. But I think it's a great place to start with creation.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for the Chinese, the creation always begins with, like most sort of nations, cultures, with chaos. You know, there's nothing is in order. It's disorganized. You know, there are the elements and the potential kind of existing, but not functional in any way, not manifest in any way. So, creation begins there. It's called like a hun. So then there's the myth that within this chaos there was an egg, and in the egg grew a giant called Pangu. And this all sounds very familiar, especially if you know Norse mythology, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And this egg broke, and this giant came out, and he kind of like separated yin and yang to bring in the polarities. And then this giant died. Right. You know, everything has a beginning and an end. And so his skull became the heavens, and his bones became the mountains. A really familiar myth to anyone who's familiar with any ancient culture at all.
Right.
Like, so for example, like Yima in Norse mythology, pretty much the same story. You know, there's a version in sort of India and so on. So really, it points to that microcosm, macrocosm thing. You know, which is the kind of esoteric essence of that story.
And it really makes, this is just a footnote that's little to do with your direct presentation, but it really puts a crimp in my working theory that whoever started the Indo-European languages had sort of this universal story that everyone adopted, but Chinese is not part of the Indo-European language family. So it's even, so either the order, the chronology is different, or there was interaction, or there's something to chaos, and then a giant comes out of an egg.
I think you're close, though. I think the root is shamanism.
Okay.
Which is what Indo-Europeans and Chinese share in common.
So
there seems to be a shamanic, and I use the word, but it's not a word I like to use because it's specifically to a certain culture. But it gives us an idea of what we're talking about.
So we need to find the first shaman, not the first language necessarily, because one will find the other. Yeah, I think shamanism is a very much misused word, and I'm misusing it right now. So excuse me. Right. So I think the very roots of religion and human spirituality and philosophy is shamanism. Okay, which is
basically an interaction with the spirit world. It's the looking at our lives and nature and trying to find out the hidden reality behind that, of which that physical reality is an expression. And that's basically it. If something goes wrong here, a shaman's idea is to transcend that physical reality and peek behind the curtain of physical reality, if you like, to see what's going on. Like we see a clock, the clock doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we open up the clock and have a look at all the gears inside. With me, they just spring everywhere, right? I break the damn thing, but I should. And that's kind of what shamanism does, and I'm not quite sure where it began. Yeah, some people will argue it's like kind of the Iranian peninsula, the Iranian area or the Mesopotamian area. And so I don't think it really matters that much. I don't think we're ever going to know.
Right.
But that all these cultures share this philosophy is really, it should really tell us something. Because another people that had a similar philosophy were the Aborigines too. They had a similar story, which throws off the Indo-European idea even more. So. Oh,
for sure. Yeah, no. Whatever it is, it didn't start in Europe. I mean, that's almost guaranteed.
Or maybe it's a part of the development of the human mind that needs to go through this stage of symbolism. Who knows? Right. Okay. Anyway. So you had all this mess, which is the physical universe, but it's still not perfect. So you have these other two gods. One's called Nuwa, who's like a dragon goddess, okay, or a snake goddess, and then you had Fuxia, her husband, and again got that polarity thing going on, that Adam and Eve thing, or Isis and Osiris, which Mark would appreciate, and so on. So you had this polarity, and they basically were meant to have organized the universe. If you like, the giant is the Titan, which dies, and then you have the new lot, right, which come across, like Olympians and so on, who put everything in order. Yeah, they make the sky separate from the earth. They build the mountains and so on. This is what New are, and importantly, they create living creatures. And they had the help of the four animals, which is really four directions. Mm-hmm. Okay, or four cardinal points, four principles. Yeah, which comes from, which is another thing you'll find in every spirituality, because one thing that makes mankind unique is we stand upright. We can orientate ourselves in four directions in a certain kind of way. So the cardinal points become important in most traditions. That's the basis of spiritual orientation, if you like.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, lots of like churches are built east to west. With the
that's where you get the word orientation from. Building churches so they faced east.
Right. In Vedic cultures, the Indians always sleep with their heads south. Which is something I recently. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, a lot of things that we don't even think about is sort of embedded in our world is based on the four cardinal points, and also helps with navigation as well. Sure.
Right. Yeah. Spiritual navigation and physical navigation are two ideas. You could take, for example, the Big Dipper as pointing north, giving you spiritual orientation. And so it symbolizes destiny, fate, that kind of thing, and where we're going. And the Feng Shui compass, the Lo Pan, not to be confused with the big bad guy in Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh,
yeah.
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah, of course it is. It's one of the paths that led me here. Oh. Right. So you, even though I wasn't after green-eyed virgins at the time, so you have the Lo Pan, which is like a Feng Shui compass, which is central to a lot of Chinese traditions, and particularly Feng Shui.
So so we're up to the four directions and the four animals. I can't remember which animals there were. I remember there was one, the vermilion bird. What's vermilion?
Red.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just
but
red.
it's got it's got the implication that it's like cinnabar in Chinese. Cinnabar is like this red stuff, like this. It's like a mineral, So.
Okay. So, okay, but that's cool because, people know the Phoenix, they know Thunderbirds, they know Firebirds, Vermilion. Sure. I don't know if it's the same or not, but it's interesting. And so the other three, I think Turtle or Tortoise was one?
Yeah, the Northern Turtle, which is, there's a reason why there is the turtle, which is quite interesting. So a lot of people think of like a Terry Pratchett or something, right? But,
right.
But Indian, she culled from Indian philosophy, actually. But it's all about the turtle shell, actually, right? Because the turtle shell has a certain number of, I think it's hexagrams, but there's also the numbers of which were used for, like if you count the turtle shell segments on the outside.
Isn't it like always 13, something like that?
Yeah, it's got a certain correspondence to certain Chinese numerology things, So, and the way they kept time in the Shang Dynasty. So, there's more to it. It's not just a turtle. There's symbolism behind this. And then you have the obviously the Azure Dragon, and you have the last one, White Tiger, which I'm sure every ancient tattoo person would know, right?
White Tiger. Sure. White Tiger, everyone knows White Dragon, and Azure Azure is blue, so the blue dragon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting itself because ancient Chinese don't distinguish between blue and green.
Okay.
Right. Like in Japan today, they don't have a green light, they have a blue light, but it's actually green.
Gotcha. I'm sure that'd be something that I guess one would have to get used to. So there was also animism, is often associated with shamanism, but it seems like animism and polytheism developed almost simultaneously, or at least rather quickly. Which, as a side note, is sort of interesting to me because when you do comparative mythologies, one of the things about the Greek mythology is that all the gods were basically humanized. They were, anthropomorphized, which sort of was a new thing. I'm not sure it was as new. I mean, if you look at some Sumerians, some were human, some weren't. And if you, it depends what you want to call a god. The Greeks, the Gorgons, there are plenty of monsters and whatever. So I'm not sure it was, uniquely Greek, but let's just say there was. But it's certainly let's just call it uniquely Greek from sort of, maybe Western East India on. But Chinese, right away, you had human gods. You had I think it was the 5 emperors, and then you have the old ones, which I'm not sure what the difference is between the old ones and the 5 emperors, but that's I'm not sure if I'm skipping ahead in the story either. So I'm going to let you pick that up.
Well, yeah, there's also another interesting aspect of this, though, is that a lot of the Chinese, what we call Chinese gods, were dead people originally, ancestors.
Ancestors, right?
So here's one difference. A lot of these gods can actually trace back to people who were living, right? And, to be dramatic about it, now are dead, right? Sure. And they kind of like went up through the ranks, through great feats. They were remembered, and they became gods in their own time.
Well, that's been copied. Enoch was human, had children, and ascended. Muhammad went off to heaven. One of the whole Shia Sunni thing is a disagreement between Muhammad's, grandchildren, basically.
Sure.
So this has been repeated. So people think, oh, it's just ancient. Not that ancient.
Yeah.
You're just not looking for it,
Yeah. So so the ancestors have like in most shamanism, ancestors are really important. Mm-hmm. And keeping that continuity between the living and the dead was a really important aspect of every culture. And I'm not just talking about Chinese culture. Like the Romans did it, and the Greeks did it, the Egyptians did it, my ancestors, the ancient Britons, they did it.
Sure.
So keeping this continuity between the living and the dead was very important in the Chinese tradition. So much so that, that these ancestors became gods. So a lot of the gods that you're familiar with, like Jade Emperor, was once a human being, and a lot of those ones that look like generals, they look like generals because they were generals, like UEFA, all these kind of guys. The kitchen god was a guy who was so righteous that he for some reason he had to commit suicide, and so the kitchen god became like in every, I'm sure it's familiar with every Chinese home. So there's a really interesting idea that a lot of the gods aren't just animistic, even though there are those ones too, as you point out. But a lot of the gods are actually ancestors. They're very human,
and very practical things. The kitchen god, I mean, that's basically bounty. That's how that you need food to eat. I mean, it's not like Julia Child. This is the kitchen. It's the kitchen.
And we have the same in the West too. Like Vesta in Rome, it's basically. I mean, kitchen makes it sound a bit strange, but maybe a hearth god would be more accurate to what that kind of represents. The heart of the home,
right?
Where the fire is, where the warmth, the light, and like you say. Nourishing or transforming things that aren't nourishing into something nourishing. You see my point? So,
absolutely, yeah.
So I'm just my voice.
That's right. Yeah, take a sip, refresh your voice.
Okay, right, that's better.
Much.
Yeah, right.
We don't want guests to struggle. If I had tea, I would cyber offer you some.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's a really unique idea in China, or seems unique. But actually, this idea that a lot of the gods are ancestors, and B, the fact that your ancestors, which you keep a relationship with, can also go up the ranks, so to speak. So.
Who are the old ones, and is it just another word for something we've already covered, or is that something different altogether? And I won't tell you why I'm particularly.
Old ones just refers to ancestors, really.
Okay.
It's not Lovecraftian or anything.
Right. I was thinking about the Lovecraftian and also Babylon 5ian, where they had the old ones, or the first ones they called them, and then we met the first one, and he was a bit underwhelming. But anyway, never meet your heroes, I guess, right?
Yeah, right. So the old ones, it just literally means that people from the old time. So.
Okay, and there's a lot of for those that I keep interjecting, but for those you're going to hear a lot of numbers repeat. So there's a lot of we have the 4 cardinal points. There's nothing particularly interesting in that because it's the 4 cardinal points, but you have the 5 emperors. You have a lot. We're going to hear so listen for the number 5 and listen for the number 7, and just in some contrast, the number 7 here usually refers to, maybe not always, to the Big Dipper, the amount of stars in the Big Dipper, which is very important in everything we're talking about here. But 7 is sort of important in lots of cultures, maybe every culture. Now, it's often associated with the Pleiades, the 7 sisters. Now, I have no idea why that's different, and why the Pleiades, people say because the Pleiades points to something that's like Orion's bow shooting the arrow, and it's those. Yeah. I don't know why that's particularly.
Yeah, I think the Pleiades, maybe I'm wrong actually, I'm thinking of another star cluster, the Hyades, which signifies spring,
right.
Like it was really important.
Right, but the Big Dipper, as you point out, points to the North Star. And also because it's a ladle, in your book you also point out that it sort of fills different things, like including the soul, and I guess what fills can empty as well if you look at it that way. But 7 repeats in lots of cultures, but it's a different star cluster. The significance of that is beyond me at this point, but for frequent listeners who intend to listen, go on, that's going to be something that I'm sure we're going to come upon over and over again.
Yeah, the Big Dipper as well. A huge symbolism in China. Did in Egypt too, actually. which probably Mog could fill you out on. He knows more about that side than I do.
Oh, I'm gonna when next I talk to him, and I will again. He's been on twice already, but I'll hit him up with that.
So, like you say, the Big Dipper was considered pointing to the immovable, from the human point of view. The sky moves around us. I know it doesn't really.
Right.
It appears to.
Right.
But at the top, there's a point that never moves, and that's come to symbolize the Tao, or the point of immovability, which is immortality, never changes in the cycle of yin and yang, which you might be familiar with from the I-Ching. And so, as well as ladling qi, heavenly qi, tian qi.
Now, is qi the same thing?
Tian, yeah.
I have so many Marvel references, and forgive me for being trite, but clearly you understand them as well. So is qi the same thing that Iron Fist channels? Not in the same way necessarily, but that's...
Yeah, popular culture references to qi, popular culture is a good reference point, actually, for people unfamiliar with things.
Sure. And I'm not saying that the importance of qi is that you can put it in your fist and knock out a dragon or knock down a wall, but that...
No, that's pretty cool, though.
No, sure, of course. Who wouldn't want that? But that's what he's channeling. That's how he harnesses that energy, though. It's almost like the Force, sort of.
Yeah, but oh my God, hold on. You're right. Sorry, something just popped up on my screen then.
That's okay.
Okay, right. So George Lucas was obviously inspired by Asian philosophy. Must have got that. Idea from, martial arts, which were popular in the 70s with Bruce Lee films. And,
absolutely.
I don't know whether, does Kung Fu come after or before Star Wars?
Before.
Well, yeah, right. Okay, right. Yeah, so, but anyway, in the early 70s, there was a big, interest in Asian things, which I'm sure George Lucas got caught up in.
He was influenced by a bunch of stuff. As it turns out, he wasn't that great a writer. He just sort of got it all together first.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well...
People are going to hate me now. Sorry.
Yeah, bet you're waiting for the hate mail on that one.
What were the Jedis? The Jedis were warrior monks.
Yeah, exactly. So, you got that idea, you got all those ideas, that the Force is basically the idea of chi or prana, whatever you want to call it.
And the Sith is the duality. They're the bad guy warrior monks. Or are they the bad guys? I don't know. That's a different show, different argument. Discussion.
Right. So anyway, so the Big Dipper was considered to be like a channel of this chi, and also something it reflects in the microcosm again, the idea of seven, and there are seven centers in people, which tie to Chinese medicine, and not only Chinese medicine but Chinese alchemy,
right?
Which is about self-transformation. So we don't think.
I'm sorry.
I should point out, we don't think this is actually the Big Dipper is actually. We know it's like stars, which are millions of miles apart in reality, light years, but it's a symbol, and the symbol is there, not by chance, but by I don't know what's the word I can use. Design.
Design. That's
for our perception.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to explain exactly. So we don't actually literally think the Big Dipper is throwing out all this power, but for the human perception here on Earth in this time and place, these patterns have a meaning.
Right, and if it's always pointing to the North Star, it sort of pretty much appears. It's at least pointing to the same direction all the time, even though it may rotate from the earthly perspective. And
and that's important too.
Yeah, and because the Chinese have, it looks like they don't just have. I think when we get into astrology, meaning the collective, we other guests and things like that, and some of the past shows, we sort of think of the Western zodiac, and I think people are familiar with the Chinese zodiac from going to Chinese restaurants in the year of this and year of that. But the Chinese have multiple zodiacs. They have a zodiac tied to Jupiter. They have a zodiac tied to the moon, and I'm sure everyone else does too. It's just not as prominent or as well known. But I find that to be very interesting as well, and I'm sure you're probably getting there.
Yeah, sure. I understand what you mean. I mean, these are ways of just looking at things that look like chance and trying to find patterns in them.
Yeah.
And then applying those patterns to how we live with nature, to understand change, because change is probably one of the only certain things we have in our life. By clinging to things and hoping they don't change in Taoism a ridiculously stupid thing to do.
Right.
So you will be unhappy if you do this.
Right. Change is the only constant, and there's the ancient Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, which doesn't sound like a curse until you think about it.
Yeah, right. Until COVID hits, of course. Or the rest of it.
There's no shortage of interesting times, and that doesn't mean your favorite movie's coming out.
Yeah, but quite often those interesting times are where we grow the most, we would argue.
Well, that's true. That's a very I don't know who came up with it, but through war comes growth.
Yeah, or progress is in direct proportion to resistance.
Oh, that's a good one. But I know that you have to burn a forest and let it regrow to replenish, and so
exactly.
All right, I'm done with my metaphors.
We could get some T-shirts done.
I know we should.
Right, so.
Ka-ching.
So anyway, I mean, there's some interesting ideas there about the Big Dipper. And I sort of explained that we don't literally think that, those particular 7 stars have. And maybe that's why it also explains why different cultures just choose different 7 stars, like the Pleiades or whatever.
Absolutely.
It's not the stars that are important so much, but the idea that they can find a pattern and make a meaning from it, which they can apply to their life.
Or perhaps, I always have to have one conspiracy theory popping up, but perhaps it was an offshoot of the school who were on the Big Dipper, and they said, no, they've got the wrong stars, and they had their followers, and they were chased out, and they had they found their way to Australia or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, it's possible.
Sure.
You just never know. Right, so that sort of covers those ideas of the Big Dipper. The 12 signs is interesting. Because a lot of people are familiar with the Chinese zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, I'm a snake, I'm a monkey, and all that sort of thing. But actually, most people are only familiar with year of, like year of the. But actually, there's a month of, a day of, and an hour of as well. So it actually gets a lot more down,
I read it in your book. I mean, even though, listen, candor to the audience, I read the book, but I skimmed over some of the chants, and I wasn't looking to expect to become a magician after one reading of it. I wanted to prepare for the interview. But even then, in my skimming, I could see that on certain months and certain days, it was like something like you couldn't eat duck because that was bad luck, and like the 9th and the 13th were bad luck days in certain things, and you couldn't practice certain things on certain days or everything would go wrong. And it gets down into, real detail.
Yeah, basically these things represent the 5 elements of yin and yang. That's why. So by looking at these combinations of the elements, it's like paper, scissors, and stones. Right?
Well, by the way, we probably should say what the 5 elements are, because I think most people think of the 4 elements. They know earth, wind, and fire, and then water. But the Chinese have 5 elements, and that's really important.
Right. So actually, the Indians and the Japanese do as well.
Cool.
Right. So, we've got wood, which is generally the first element, which represents growth when things first begin. Okay. The first thing to point out actually about the elements is the wuxin, is that they're not actually substances, in the same sense that Plato would have thought of the 5 elements, or Aristotle, but stages in the nature of the change of something.
Right. And they all point to each other in sort of, a circular arrow.
So you take any vibration. I hate using this one because it sounds new agey, right? But I mean it in a literal way as well. Take any vibration that has a beginning and an end, and the 5 elements can be put along that vibration, so you can see its life cycle. So wood is its beginning, its end, its enthusiasm, its beginning, and so wood sort of leads to fire. So faster action leads to excitement, and it combusts, if you like, and that turns to soil, or ash, if you like. But ash becomes metal, and then metal becomes, when it melts, water, and then water nourishes wood, and you go back on that cycle again. So it has 5 elements, but they're not to be considered things which are separate by themselves, but parts of a circle, a cycle. So really important distinction to make.
Yep.
Okay.
And I
So
just
it's about
noticed,
transformation and change.
and I just noticed you have the 5 elements and you have the duality. Well, the 5 plus 2 is 7.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, you can have yin and yang stages of those elements too, right? So you can have yang wood becomes yin wood, then yin wood becomes yang fire, and so on like that. So you have this cycle as well. So when we say, maybe it's best not to do something on this certain day, it sounds really superstitious, yeah. Like don't walk under a ladder on a Friday the 13th or something. But it's actually about analysing the vibration of the elements on a particular day, at a particular time, according to a Chinese calendar, which has been going since, roughly, right back to the Shang Dynasty. So.
How old is the Shang Dynasty, just for some reference, whatever it is, BCE?
Yeah, you look at it's so old, it's uncertain, but it goes back to roughly the Neolithic times.
Okay, so that would be what, like 10,000 to 5,000 BCE? Yeah. Maybe older. We don't quite know.
Some of the elements of that were there, but the Shang Dynasty is incredibly long. Yeah.
I mean, the creation myth, you noted that they said that it took 18,000 years, which is in stark contrast to 7 days. One of those days was rest. So
yeah, right.
Very, very specific name. Very specific number there.
These are all symbolic numbers, of course. So I don't think it was literally 18,000, but it was a thing. But now we know that the Big Bang, is probably in a second or less. So creation didn't take that long.
Yeah. Well, the Big Bang is something that I just can't wrap my head around. I'm not rejecting it. I just don't. It's too astronomical for my little pea brain, to comprehend.
Yeah, mine too. It is but I think it ties in with a lot of these Asian and Western philosophies too.
I do too, which I find to be amazing, because the Big Bang is a rather new theory, and science is supposed to be at odds with religion and philosophy, and it seems like not so much.
Yeah. Well, if you actually look at the history of science, it was basically, especially an offshoot of religion anyway, Hermetic religion.
Yeah. What they call it, natural philosophy during the Renaissance, or Age of Enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. So I sidetracked you somewhere. We were doing the 5 elements, and then in my notes I sort of I just sort of wrote down things that may not be in any particular order, but I know the I-Ching is very important, and I don't know exactly what that is. I know the I-Ching is read through hexagrams, and I know that there's also something called Fen Shui, and I know a lot of people know about Fen Shui through sort of constant redecorating, and that's sort of like the the commercialized version of it, and certainly not the entirely spiritual.
Interior decor. Okay, yeah. So. These are some of the traditional 5 arts of Daoism. Like divination was one of them, and that includes I-Ching. Okay, but what a lot of people don't realize is that I-Ching, there are quite a few ways of doing this, right? So most Westerners will think this is I-Ching. Buy the book, get 3 coins, or even if you're more fancy, get some yarrow sticks. And throw the yarrow sticks or the coins, and then open the book, and then read, like some obscure text, like I think Terry Pratchett joked once, the mollusk rises from the, then you're meant to put this in meaning into your life.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Terry Pratchett is a science fiction writer, a science fiction fantasy writer, and very British.
Yeah. Right. So that's the I-Ching most people are familiar with. Okay, but there's a lot more to I-Ching.
Well, let's hear the more
for example,
part.
In China, this throw the coins and read a passage out of a book is hardly ever done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is more or less a practice in the West. It started with, I wouldn't say started with, but it's more popular with Confucians, who were non-religious, more or less non-religious in a sense. And it's meant to be the voice of the ancestors. But in Daoism, there are other ways of doing the I-Ching as well. Like, for example, a good I-Ching reader using what we call the, for example, Li Hua or plum flower, Mei Hua I-Ching, which is like plum flower I-Ching. Doesn't use coins or anything. Look outside, count how many birds that just happen to fly past. Or he's doing a reading for someone, look at the colour of their clothes and pick the hexagram like this. So look at someone's body language and read the I-Ching from what he's saying, and doing some calculations using numbers and this sort of thing, just from someone's body language, the colours they wear, the words they happen to say. He looks for patterns in nature, not just using coins.
Right.
Another way, much more complex.
Is it too simple but is it a fair summary or simplistic to say it's a way of reading the animistic, shamanistic world around you?
That's perfectly accurate. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good for me.
Right. Okay, right. Another way is called Lo Yao. This is much more involved. Liu means 6 and Yao means lines. Okay, and basically it combines I-Ching with aspects of Chinese astrology to get more accurate readings. Right down to, for example, you're looking for a date, for example, or you're looking for an opportunity in your job to get promotion. Lo Yao can be that so accurate that it can tell you the height of the boss that you have to go and see to, and not just some obscure. It doesn't use the I-Ching text at all. It uses its own way of analysing the hexagrams and the patterns of change to give you more accurate information. So just to point out that I-Ching means a lot more than what most Westerners think. There's actually many other ways of doing I-Ching.
And how does I don't know if I should ask first, how does the Zodiac tie in, or how does the hexagram tie in? But I imagine that they're all interrelated.
Yeah, there's a kind of correspondence there. Remember that when we say Zodiac, we're talking about elements and yin and yang.
Which Zodiac? I read that there's the lunar Zodiac, there's the Jupiter Zodiac. This is going to sound stupid.
You're looking at the Jupiter one here.
Okay, you're looking at the Jupiter one here.
Okay. So that's called the sexagenary cycle, the cycle of 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's called the Jiazi calendar, because these are it's how it begins. Jia is like A. It's like the Chinese word for A, if you like. And Z, Jia is like the Chinese for A, and Z for B, for example. So it's like A, B, then A, C, A, D, and it carries on like that.
Do we know why they picked Jupiter as opposed to the sun? I mean, there's a lunar one also, but I mean, there must be something where they must.
There is a solar one
Oh, there is. Is it?
Yeah.
But did they come up with the same shapes as us?
That's the calendar of the solar terms.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
I say us. I'm in the United States. Us. So I like, in other words, when the Chinese looked at the zodiac, did they see, for instance, a Scorpio during or did they see a different shape, or is that just lost to time?
Yeah, they see a completely different thing. They have
thank goodness.
They have 28 basic constellations.
Okay. Because I look up, I see nothing. I have to be honest. I mean, I see the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, and I see the Orion's belt, and that's interesting. But I look up, and people say, "See that?" No, I don't.
No, but really, that's all you need to see. You just need to see what you need to see. For most astrologers, if you went up to the average astrologer and say, "Oh, can you point to a Libra?" They probably wouldn't be able to see.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So I don't think it's necessary.
So I'm just confessing it. So that's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So so I don't think it's necessary to point out where Baumhaus is or anything.
Okay. So what is Fen Shui, and not the redecorate. I mean, there's the redecorating aspect that I'm sure comes from the actual history or philosophy, but what is Fen Shui?
Okay, right. So Feng Shui, to go back, right, the origin of Feng Shui is about how to bury the dead.
Oh,
yeah. Right, that's the original Feng Shui. All the first books, it's called Yin Jai Feng Shui, which means the house of the dead, basically. Not the video game, by the way.
Right.
Right. Do you remember that?
No, video games is my thing.
Yeah. Right. But anyway, so you had this idea that when your ancestors die, they're still linked to your prosperity, and to keep that prosperity in your lineage, your family lineage, you had to ensure a really good burial for the dead, for your ancestors. So that's where the first Feng Shui comes from. The earliest and most original books are about how to bury the dead properly. Because if you didn't bury the dead properly, you could be in trouble.
So is the terracotta army sort of Feng Shui gone on steroids, or is it like a pyramid?
In a sense, in a sense, but it's more to do with the fact that luckily the Emperor Qin didn't want to sacrifice people anymore, and so he made up his own ones, to help him in the spirit world.
Oh, that's good.
But a lot of Feng Shui, and I would argue there's also a Western Feng Shui too.
Sure, go ahead.
But it's just not called that, Like if you, in my own country, you have like Stonehenge, or churches built in the right place, or even a village built in the right place where you get the most prosperity near a river, not too far behind this mountain or in front of it. That's Feng Shui originally.
Or mound building also. Mound burials, I mean.
Town planning, So so the early Feng Shui, a lot of it's common sense. Don't build your house too here, otherwise you're not going to be able to grow any crops,
Right.
And, so you don't get enough sunlight here.
Or if you do, you're eating your ancestors, which is, sort of like maybe worse than actual cannibalism. I don't know. I don't want you to grade which is worse, but.
Right. So anyway, the earliest Feng Shui was about what you call land form Feng Shui, which is looking at the shape of the land, not the color of your bedroom.
Gotcha.
Right. So it's looking at the shape of the land, how the rivers flow, the quality of the soil. Like they say, if you have a good Feng Shui master, and he doesn't pick up a handful of soil from your garden and look at it, he's not a very good Feng Shui master.
Yeah.
Right. They shouldn't just go straight into the bedroom and go, "Oh, darling, this should be like a nice peach color," like that sort of thing.
I hope Vicky doesn't hear this.
Yeah. Right.
Because I'm not editing that out, so.
Right. Right. So so a good Feng Shui master actually looks at the situation of a place. What is it? Cecil B. DeMille said, location.
Sure.
That's Feng Shui.
Okay, very
And
good.
whether it's for the living or the dead, it's about getting good energy and ideas.
So all over my condo, where there's two dolphins together, or two roosters together, or two turtles together. That
Right, okay. That kind of Feng Shui, there is some reality behind it.
Okay, good.
Because if you think of psychology and how we deal with cards.
I don't want you to cause a fight in my condo, because let me be clear to the audience. I will lose that fight to La Sicaria. She will beat me 10 out of 10 times.
Right. There are aspects to this, but maybe a Chinese Feng Shui guy would do it differently from how a Western would do it. Like we do place certain objects in certain areas. Certainly not dolphins, because that's not really a Chinese thing.
Okay.
Like things like elephants or tigers, even certain crystal formations. This is where it becomes magic. You start leading into organizing space to attract certain energies, which is basically a good definition of magic, really. So there are certain ideas, using color and form, where you can change your prosperity, in your life. But you need to be really careful that you don't slip into a kind of New Age interpretation of this.
Right. Okay. It's too trite. It's too commercialization of something that's much deeper.
Yeah, there's like a lot of things now.
Yeah, that's let's just call that let's call it America's fault. Well, the United States' fault.
I was brought up as a Catholic. You could buy like spinning Jesuses with light bulbs on and stuff. Like flashing them.
So it's like that, but it's not quite turning Christmas into Santa Claus. It's turning Christmas into Jesus baubles. Is basically what it is.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
So okay, so I wanted to get into. Jeez, I have to read my whole right, because you were talking about ghosts that were very important, and I'm sure that is tied into the ancestor worship. But you need ghosts for the magic, and I also want to talk about, so I don't forget it, that the enormous difference in how the serpent or dragon is viewed in the East versus the West.
Okay, right. So the idea of ghosts in Chinese magic is, like I say, it's tied to the idea of ancestors, the angry dead. It's a feature in most ancient cultures. Like here's an old story. Like there's this explorer goes to, I think it's somewhere in Africa or Borneo or somewhere like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's one of those kinds of shamanic cultures where they still preserve those traditions. And this visiting university guy, anthropologist, walks into the witch doctor's tent or whatever, and the witch doctor's breath is taken away, and he says, "God," and he's like amazed. He says, "Don't you bury your ancestors in England or America, wherever he's from?" And the anthropologist says, "Why do you say that?" He says, "Because behind you are all your ancestors looking unhappy." And this kind of gives you a key idea of,
Is this because in the West, I'm assuming it's the same in Europe and certainly in the US, that we bury our dead in these boxes as opposed to just into the earth?
Drop them and forget them.
Yeah, but also that they can't become one with the earth again. It's not ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's slow decomposition, and that's just based on the quality of the box and how much lining there is. I don't like to get soapboxy, but I think it's a general waste of real estate to begin with. But especially when we're organic materials, and again, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and you defeat that in our burial, which is entirely for the living. It's entirely to it's some artificial construct that helps the living to you want to see your loved one in basically a comfortable plush bed.
Right. Yeah, a lot of it's about forgetting.
Yeah.
like to be forgotten, is a terrible thing in China. Even if you go back to like Babylonian texts, may my name be remembered, this kind of thing. But the idea that like in Chinese philosophy, to be cut off from your ancestors is to become to be alone, and also to be cut off from your ancestors is meant to cut yourself off from that ancestral reservoir of knowledge and wisdom which has developed over generations, which you could have access to, but you're no longer part of that, because in the West we say we bury and we forget. Mm-hmm. We've made death and old age a taboo thing and not a thing of respect.
Yeah.
So I think Chinese, even if you're not into magic or anything like that, there's one thing we could learn, is learn more about family and lineage and our ancestors, even if they're not nice ancestors.
Sure.
Then we need to respect that heritage too, even if it has to teach us a lesson in, like a lot of our ancestors would have done things that weren't nice. We need to learn from that as well. Right. Never forget these things.
Right. I promise I didn't make up this saying. Somebody else did. I can't remember, but it always stuck with me, so I always remembered it. And they said, good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment.
Yeah, sure. Right. So so changing our history and forgetting our history to look at it on another level, is something that we shouldn't be doing. Even though we may do it unconsciously, and sometimes we have to relearn our history, which is okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that's part of the ancestor thing.
Yeah, people shouldn't be afraid of history, and it doesn't mean that you have to be proud of all history. History is history. No, it's important.
I'm British.
Well, yeah, I'm American. We learned absolutely no lessons from you. Practically. I guess we learned a few, like no quartering and things like that. But beyond that, not the big ones, or the lessons we learned maybe were the wrong ones. I don't know. That's for a different show and different disciplines. Anyway.
But anyway, we should learn from our ancestors and from their history, even when it's not pleasant.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly correct. Okay, let's talk about serpents. Because serpents and dragons usually, poor Ophiuchus got cut out of our constellation, the serpent bearer. The serpent is often, the Satan, the devil, evil, the snake. Eve is the serpent. The reptilians are ruling the world. Everything serpent and dragons have to be slain. They're St. George had to kill the dragon to cure Britain. Not in the East. In the East, the dragon is venerated. One of those four animals was the Azure dragon.
Because again, it represents wisdom, but serpents represent energy to dragons. We don't kill energy. Right. We want to use it and help, and it helps us. But there is a big difference between dragons on the East and dragons in the West. But maybe that's because they're not really the same thing.
Elaborate.
Right. So, it's like in dragons are translation using, sort of basically European language to translate a concept roughly. Yeah, right. And so like when we say Chinese dragon, what we really mean is lung, which is like kind of looks a bit like a dragon. So there's also a Chinese unicorn called a qilin, which actually looks nothing like a unicorn either. So. But anyway, to get to the idea that there's 2 points I think is firstly, dragons probably have a much more rich history in the West too, where they weren't always bad, but sometimes they were, but I've got my own theories about that. It's to do with energy, Saint Michael killing the dragon. It comes from an image of Apollo, sort of killing the python, which created the gas is necessary for the Pythoness, the oracle, to, go into a trance and give the Delphic oracle, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, that's where originally that image comes from, of a solar deity, killing a dragon. But to return to the Chinese idea, the Chinese idea is to do with mainly the weather, water. They're spirits of weather, or weather in Chinese is called tianqi, which means like heavenly qi. So not all dragons are good in China either. Let's get this straight too.
Okay.
Right. So some dragons you had to appease, right? You had to like throw things throw things in the river, like rice dumplings and stuff, So it was like little rice called zhongzi, like little packages of rice which you used to throw in with great ceremony, and then do the dragon boat race. You might know this. So it goes back to an old tradition where, every year you get like these floods or really bad storms, or the rains won't come in, or something like this, and you had to appease the dragons to so you get rains for your crops and so on. So they weren't always good.
It all starts with the rivers, right? It all, Tigris, Euphrates, Nile, the Yellow River. It's
sure. So the idea behind the dragon was it basically boils down to weather and water. Okay.
And duality. So not all dragons are good. So duality. It makes sense. It's consistent.
Right. So they're very watery. Where Western dragons tend to be quite fiery, don't they?
Yes.
So or earthy at the minimum.
Yeah.
Kind of poisonous. But I don't know how, when we read about these poisonous dragons in the West, I don't know how much they've been informed by later Christian writers or reinterpreting the dragon, in their sense, in the Christian theological sense. So I don't know how accurate some of those writings are.
Well, I think the fairest thing you said is probably one of the first things is when you said they're not the same thing. It's just we give them the same name now in English, but they're not the same creature. They have some similarities, but it's they're further apart than like a lion and a tiger are. They're completely different things.
Yeah, the conception's different. But then I wonder, like if you really looked back, because I'm not really a great expert in Western mythology, I learned something. I was doing the Hermetics thing.
Sure.
But then you do see like some ideas about snakes and dragons which tend towards the more idea of them being dispensers of wisdom, which is something Eastern dragons can do as well. It's usually symbolized by the pearl. You might have seen the dragon clutching the pearl.
Is that where the phrase "pearls of wisdom" comes from?
Don't know. In China, maybe, but I think maybe it's because it's also just happens to be a Christian symbol as well.
Oh, okay.
Like don't cast pearls before swine and that sort of thing.
That one I've never heard.
So the dragon's a different creature, which can we compare them? Maybe a little bit, but not really the same thing, in my opinion.
Okay. Listen, I think that's fair enough. Now, folks, I hope that you felt that this was Chinese magic, but if you're looking for more practical, like a how-to book, the good news is Jason wrote a book. So it's Jason Reed, and he wrote Practical Chinese Magic. And not only do you get a lot of the background and stuff that we are talking about now, but he actually lays out the exercises, which, and he compares them to the things that might be closest to it. So he'll compare certain things to yoga and other cultures, so that you understand sort of, in your terms. When I say Euro, I'm just, I'm assuming that, it's mostly, Euro-Western centric. But he actually tells you the chants and, how many times to repeat things. And actually there's photos of hand movements and there's pictures of how certain things should appear, and so it really is not just a book on what we've been talking about, but there's it's literally a how-to manual. So it's very absorbable.
Yeah, I've actually written 3 books.
Okay. Yeah, no, let's hear about the other 2 then. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, the first one I wrote was a slim book called Thunder Magic, which is about a certain kind of inner alchemy. Just not like Doctor Strange, it's like it's about an internal alchemy called Leifa, which means thunder law, thunder method in Chinese. It goes right back to the Song Dynasty. It combines Neigong with internal alchemy with talismans and stuff like this, and it talks about this. And I've done another one called, which sounds really strange, Fox Magic. It's about the nine-tailed fox and the tradition of that through Asia, and some of the magical schools that arose up from the belief in the nine-tailed fox, which you might be familiar with.
I have seen the nine-tailed fox, but mostly in what I thought was Japanese, like a Japanese ghost.
Yeah, it's Chinese in origin, though.
Okay, so what's the significance of the nine-tailed ghost? And before I forget, I cannot possibly let you go without asking you about Monkey King. So, but let's start with the nine-tailed fox.
Song Wukong, yeah. Right. So the nine-tailed fox is basically what a dakini is to Buddhism. It's a female spirit that can teach, but it has its dangers. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of dakini and Tibetan yoga and that sort of thing.
I am not.
Okay, right. Okay, so in the yoga tradition, there are female spirits called dakinis, which through meditation and that sort of thing, the dakini can communicate with the yogi and give teachings and that sort of thing. Usually, about more methods of gnosis or knowledge, and the same idea kind of carried through to China through the nine-tailed fox, which has but also similarly, even though it has its benefits, it has its dangers. Yeah.
So it can exact a price, and that price can be high. Well, that's sort of a recurring theme. I mean, listen, it got Eve and Adam cast out of Eden, right?
Compare it with the Western idea of Lilith, maybe.
Ooh, well, sure, I love that.
That's a rough comparison. Okay, so I don't want to I'm not a great believer in comparative mythology in some areas. I think that a little bit's okay.
Yeah.
But you can get to the point where you're like trying to match things which don't really match, even though they seem like it on the surface. Right?
Is there a significance to the number 9 with 9 tails? Is it?
Yeah, there is. 9 is a number you constantly see in Eastern mysticism. Any multiple of 9 adds up to 9, right? So it represents eternity.
Okay.
Immortality.
Oh, well, that sounds good, but I guess it could also be, may you live in interesting times, right? It could be that case. All right. Monkey King, who, I mean, everybody's heard of Monkey King, and even if you haven't heard of Monkey King, if you watch Dragon Ball Z, like Goku is apparently based on Monkey King, which is probably the most tritest version of it. Monkey King, sort of like Hercules, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, Monkey King's an interesting one because he has, again, the real Monkey King has a really ancient history, as an actual god, in China. Okay. Pretty much very similar to some ideas of Hanuman in India, who also had a monkey god. And he represents bravery and virtue, but also things like anger, which can get you in trouble, So the idea of the Monkey King we're familiar with is Journey to the West, where a real historical event is taken, and that's how Tanzan goes to India to fetch the Tripitaka, the 3 baskets of law, brings them back to China to promote Buddhism. So they only had a little bit of the Buddhist sutras at that point. And it's a real true story. The real monk, we still have his writings, went to India and to a place called Gandhara, which is like a center of, Buddhist studies, Nalanda University and that sort of place. And he brought it back to China. But The Monkey King's a very clever book, and it's a kind of a tale of spiritual growth. So you have these three characters, the Monkey King, Sun Wukong, Zhu Jailer, or Pixie, as we know him as, and Sandy, who's like a water demon. And they all appear in Chinese magic as well, as characters, because they're so beloved in China. But anyway, so these three characters represent three kind of vices in humanity. Monkey with his anger, demons, and a fight all the time.
Right.
Pixie, like the ladies, and sort of like so lust and greed.
Mm-hmm.
And Sandy, which is inhumanity, hatred, dislike.
What a combination.
Yeah. And so the journey to the West, and the West is very symbolic as well. And it's got like something called Xitian, which is like the Western heaven paradise in Chinese ideas. And as they go towards this paradise, or the place where the Buddha Sutras are, their characters get changed by the journey as they travel through experiences of having to be selfless and things like that. And so it's actually a very clever story about the regeneration of human vice into human, love and compassion, and fighting for good rather than for, ill.
Well, I think that is actually quite nice. That is probably a good place to stop. We have covered a ton of stuff. I want you to tell the folks again the names of your books, where they can find them, and any other way they can follow you. If you want to be followed, how they can support you.
Okay, I'll send you a link because I can never remember my own links. That's what I'm like, because I'm not really this kind of I'm a scholar.
You're not a self-promoter. You're not a salesman.
I don't do much self-promotion. So anyway, Ryan. But I do have a new website just being created now, actually. Okay. So I'll send you a link for that.
Well,
I think it's
maoshantemple.com,
so it's nice and easy.
Wait, what is it?
It's maoshantemple.com. That's MAO SHAN Temple TEMPLE.com.
Okay, that's it. And then are your books linked to that website?
Not yet. It's still building.
So let's get the names of one is Practical Chinese Magic.
Yeah, you've got Thunder Magic. You have Fox Magic, and you have Practical Chinese Magic. And next up is Lu Ban, the Lu Ban Sutra, which is a Chinese grimoire, which I'm translating.
Oh, cool.
Grimoire
is like a book of magic.
West has the Key of Solomon.
Oh, nice.
China has its own Key of Solomon called the Lu Ban Sutra, which I'm translating right now. And that should be published by Christmas, maybe. So you can open up the secrets of darkness from your stocking.
Perfect. What is more appropriate for a show called The Garden of Doom than the keys to letting in the apocalypse? So perfect. Armageddon is us. I thank you so much. Send me those links. We're recording this on August 27th. I have had an embarrassment of richness in booking guests. So I currently have a 6-show backlog, and I'm doing 2 shows this weekend and 3 shows next weekend. So I never know when we'll drop shows. The audience knows that. So fear not, you've got plenty of time to send me the stuff, and I will try to put in the show notes.
Before I came on the show, I listened to a few. They're really interesting.
I appreciate
you asked some
that.
great questions.
I try and I try to read the books that people send me. I try to do a little bit of looking into it, but I try to listen to all the guests because all of the other guests have informed me, and I really feel like I've taken like graduate level courses in these areas from just some of the great information that guests have provided me, and it's been a amazing journey. I don't know how to monetize it. I don't know if that's particularly important. But I really enjoy it, which is probably more important. And I'm glad that people, especially like yourself, who are sort of immersed in the occult or alternative or whatever you want to call it, think the shows are quality, because that's very validating. And I am.
Reminds me of a friend of mine. I won't say his name, but he had a new. He did his play sound. It's all like occulty and everything.
Yeah.
It's not the sort of thing I do personally, but he did it. He had like Bathmel on the wall and stuff.
Right.
And me and my wife and his new girlfriend came out for the first time, and we walked in, and he says, "Welcome to the world of the occult." Oh, it was hilarious at the time.
All right, well, I thank you very much. Maybe we'll come on again to do maybe a more detailed exploration of what's traditional Taoism or something like that, or we'll find other things to talk about. But no, I really appreciate it, and
I'm always willing. So.
Very cool. This is great. All right, folks. So you know where to follow his website. You know what his books are. And again, we thank you. We rate, review, share with your friends. The show very much benefits from referrals. And we will hear from you again next week in the Garden of Doom.
莫慌都莫慌，今年的姑娘更漂亮。
遗忘都遗忘，去年的烦恼和姑娘。莫慌都莫慌，今年的姑娘更漂亮。遗忘都遗忘，去年的烦恼和姑娘。莫慌都莫慌，今年的姑娘更漂亮。遗忘都遗忘，去年的烦恼和姑娘。莫慌都莫慌，今年的姑娘更漂亮。
遗忘都遗忘，去年的烦恼。